Where does this element...
He hasn't said a single thing that isn't cookie cutter from every other person I've heard speak in this field who comes from academia. Like, every single one of them is usually along those lines of, like, I'm going to tell you something that is interesting, it might have some historical relevance. Let's talk about Dante's Inferno and how the seventh circle of hell kind of relates to our current paradigm. And you're like, okay, cool, fascinating. And he's like, on the 15th canto or so, we will finally realize that this is actually about our modern paradigm and the collapse of free speech at the hands of what we can only consider this new form of woke liberal, or they'll usually add neoliberal so it gets you on board, woke neoliberal indoctrination. And you're just like, oh my, whoa. Oh, I love whistle distant. Let me move my little bit here. We got ourselves a little bit of a sleeper. Alright, let's start this up. We got to do ourselves a wee bit of Rattle Brown. You're being silence, I'll shut you up. Let's see this one.
Out of control government power, chances are that that's exactly what's happening. I spoke to Brad Evans, who is a professor of philosophy at Bath University. We talk about Foucault, Nietzsche, the impossibility of communication between people from different political camps. How are we going to get out of this tribalism? Is there a way out of Puritanism, authoritarianism in all of its forms? This conversation took place on my podcast, Under the Skin, available from Luminary, to which you can subscribe if you wanna. Stay to the end of this clip, tell me what you think about this conversation, and tell me, how are we going to create new spaces for dialogue, discussion, and ultimately change?
Before any critique or criticism of this, I do want to say he looks cozy. He looks comfortable, he looks cozy. That looks like a cozy getup. Say something nice to start. I don't know what this video is even going to be about, you know? I just saw you're being silenced and how the left is trying to shut you up. I assume that had something to do with the 1984s, the cancelling of the cultures, the Garfield Orwells that I've heard so much about.
How would you use your pre-existing...
Once again, cozy. Like, why not? You know? Too many people are like, what am I doing? Wearing t-shirts. I should be wearing blankets.
Rubric of analysis, in particular with regard to this pandemic. What do you think about what's going on in places like Australia?
Okay, more praise before I've even seen what they're going to talk about. Because Brad Evans, standing here specifically in this kind of like new art piece behind you, it makes it look as if it's kind of like part of your own hair. Like it blends the two together. This is, I don't know if you planned that out. If you were like, okay, if I stand specifically here, I can basically look like an anime character. That's pretty cool though. But anyways, let's hear what they have to say. I'm here for the content, not the aesthetics.
Yeah, vis-a-vis authoritarianism, and how has liberalism, with all of its initial emphasis on freedom, has become antithetical to that in practice? And do you even agree with that analysis?
Yeah, I think I've often found, in terms of analysis of power, if the location of power looks obvious, it's probably not situated there, right? So you know, and I often felt that Trump was very much a distraction, and a powerful distraction, but a distraction nonetheless to the wider operations of power, you know. And we knew historically, if you want to understand, you know, good old-fashioned state power in the United States of America, it was never George Bush, it was always Dick Cheney. You know, there was always something behind this that's kind of operating, and that's how.
Okay, you haven't said anything new. Stuff everyone already kind of knows.
In a situation where, you know, if you talk about religions always have these narratives of salvation. And there comes a moment where the social media companies suddenly say, you know what, we're going to save you from this guy, right? We're going to become the political salvation because we now recognize that this guy is dangerous. And actually en masse, literally throw, you know, an elected president of the United States of America off these platforms, right? Now you think, well, you know, some will say, well, actually, you know, we had too much of Trump in our headspace. But should these organizations, whatever we think of Trump, I've written very critically of him, but these companies should not have that power to basically strip away the voice of a president of the United States of America. And I think that is, you know, and to me, it was almost revealing how, you know, it was almost like a case of where's Wally, right? Trump seemingly just disappeared from the planet.
Again, you haven't said anything no one's not said before. I'm curious for this new analysis.
Real kind of different Puritanism, you know, and I'm kind of reminded, for instance, you know, there's that very famous quote by Friedrich Nietzsche when he says, God is dead. and we have killed him, right? If you read the full quote from Nietzsche, Nietzsche's is terrified by the death of God. Because he goes on to say, you know, who are we going to become now we've become the murderers of murderers? And he realized we would become gods in the place of God, and all the violence that we would commit because we replaced God with a nation state. And he understood that there was.
So when you have academics, I wonder what Brad Evans' field of study is. Let's see. Brad Evans. Because he's speaking very similar to the way that Jordan Peterson talks about a lot of these topics, where he'll mix in, which I'm sure is a very astute analysis of historical literature as well as fictional literature throughout the ages, and then combine that with this worry about what is inevitably going to be the collapse of society due to censorship, cancel culture, the SJWs coming for us all. Okay, so he's a British academic, a professor of political violence at the Department of Politics, Language and International Studies. Oh, this one's more interesting. Evans holds 2 master's degrees from the University of Leeds in Development Economics and International Relations. His PhD, titled War, the Politics of Life, dealt with forms of resistance to liberal regimes of power, during which he spent during the Zapatista communities of... Whoa, wait, what's going on here? Evans was previously senior lecturer at the International Relations School of Sociology, Politics and International Studies at the University of Bristol. He's been visiting a few fellows at the Committee of the Global Thought at the University of Columbia. He presents political, philosophical, aesthetic perspectives on violence. So he might actually be an interesting guest. Okay, let's go on.
We were creating a God more terrifying still. And I understood that, right? And this led to a particular kind of puritanical politics. Now, I think we're in an age today where liberalism has collapsed, where the right itself is becoming more emboldened in its ideas of identity and sovereignty.
No, he said nothing interesting yet.
Where does this element...
He hasn't said a single thing that isn't cookie cutter from every other person I've heard speak in this field who comes from academia. Like, every single one of them is usually along those lines of, like, I'm going to tell you something that is interesting. It might have some historical relevance. Let's talk about Dante's Inferno and how the seventh circle of hell kind of relates to our current paradigm. And you're like, okay, cool, fascinating. And he's like, on the 15th canto or so, we will finally realize that this is actually about our modern paradigm and the collapse of free speech at the hands of what we can only consider this new form of woke liberal, or they'll usually add neoliberal, so it gets you on board, woke neoliberal indoctrination, and you're just like, oh my, whoa, interesting.
Of the left, which I find myself having absolutely nothing in association with whatsoever, because it's collapsed into a social media driven puritanism. I just simply don't recognize myself in, because there's no nuance, there's no opportunity to have a viable critique in the middle. There's no, as you say, you know, that...
This doesn't have to do with what you think it has to do with, though. That's the problem with all of these. Like, he's got to take a little bit of time to perhaps... Oh, hi, super zoom. My buttons are broken again. But he's got to take a little bit of time to recognize that that happens to all groups on Twitter. All of them. Indigenous Twitter, Black Twitter, sports Twitter. Every like group of Twitter at one point or another is going to be screaming at one another. It has a lot more to do with the platform. When you've got a platform that's driven primarily by AI algorithms, and those algorithms are with purpose to keep you on their platforms as long as possible, as most reactionary as possible, because that drives more engagement, that drives more clicks. It's all about manipulating us as people and the way our minds work, and just squeezing us for every last second of engagement, getting us just forcibly to get at each other aggressively, constantly. Like, oh God, I hate you so much. Oof, that was weird. That was strange.
Prior to this pandemic, you know, so many of us were writing critically about the excessive power of the state's right to ban comedy, culture, you know, the way in which the old, you know, Giorgio Agamben wrote, what defines the sovereign state was its right to ban, its ability to ban things. That's its power, right? So we were writing critically about the state's right to ban. We were writing very critically about, you know, the whole project of Michel Foucault was writing critically about the politics of health and how, you know, biopolitics was always deeply political. So there's this radical movement which happens in the 1960s where we're critiquing the sovereign right to ban.
Brad Evans, the first anarcho-centrist.
Politics of pharmacology. Not that we want to do away with medicine completely.
Well, I I find it kind of off-putting that you'll have a lot of these figures, these academic figures who will come forward, and they might have some incredible things in their background, you know, from everyone from someone like, say, Richard Dawkins, who has done incredible writings in the fields of evolution, of which I would still to this day recommend some of his literature if you were trying to learn about that stuff, the selfish gene, for example. Or you'll have Brad Evans, who studied apparently with the Zapatistas, which is also something incredible, but they both come at this, and I mean, I'm sorry, it happens to typically be white academics, old white academics, who will then want to talk about how, in the modern paradigm, it is just frightening that no one can say or do anything, especially in relation to fields that need that, like the necessity for either researchers to be able to propose things that may be controversial to broader society, or for comedians to be able to say whatever comes to their mind, to challenge people, and that's what has traditionally been their role. Like in both cases, when like they're not being silenced in the way you think they are if you're relating this directly to social media. Like social media and the operations of Twitter, you have to think of them as private corporations because that's what they are. You can't think of them as like, we detach ourselves so much from the reality of what is actually running behind the scenes of all these apps on a daily basis. We just use them. If you are doing it live right now, by the way. If you're watching me on Twitch or on the Serfs.tv, you're live right now engaging with this, but you don't think that there is also a whole bunch of technicians somewhere else having to deal with all this kind of stuff. And there are boards as well as enormous groups of people who are studying the best way to keep you engaged at all times. And in any way, if that puts that in danger or it doesn't get the same response, then it's not going to be promoted in the same way as it was before, as is the way these algorithms work. Like, there's a reason everyone is now complaining about this. Like, there's a reason every single person who uses these apps is both like, I'm addicted to it, so I can't stop. I have to use it, either because I want to find out what the latest thing is, and I just love that, or I want to be able to yell at people who do show me something I don't like, you know? Everyone complains about it. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on. This is something that unifies everybody. But at the same time, everyone is just like aiming at the wrong thing. Like, you got this Brad Evans, and look how pleased Russell Brand is, by the way. Oh, mate, yeah, tell me more about it, how it works here.
But we recognize there's a politics to it. Today, you can't question that, unless you want to be thrown in bed with the alt-right. You know, it's kind of, and I know you've been kind of subjected to this yourself. If you're kind of standing in the middle and going, well, I don't know, can we just have a little bit of nuance here? Can we just actually just step back and criticize some of this?
They want to nationalize social media companies. I do as well, but here's the thing to keep in mind, right? And this is the thing that I think...
God, those communists are amazing.
Where's the message, Catalina Gearbox? Sorry, it was the robot that didn't say it, but I will say it. Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Why is that even a meme? Everyone knows it's true. It's 100% a Christmas movie. It's like one of the only good Christmas movies. There's like a very small selection of good Christmas movies. But Die Hard is definitely in the list of acceptable acceptable Christmas movies. But anyways, hey, here's the thing. And this is what might separate my views on the matter of someone like, say, Glenn Greenwald or even these people that we see before you, right? The idea of nationalizing social media can't be in and of itself a solution to this on its own. Because if you have a country, the United States, that happens to have a broken democratic system, if it happens to have a very large amount of discretionary spending that goes into a very handful of what I consider to be dangerous corporations, particularly the military-industrial complex, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, stuff of that nature, if you have the government that now owns and or controls social media, so it actually does become the realm of free speech, that would have to be done with a lot of caveats, as in the people would still have to be able to be the ones that are ultimately going to be controlling aspects of that. Otherwise, whatever person is in control, if it's conservatives one year, if it's Republicans one year, if it's Democrats the next year, they're going to be able to fine-tune it to the ways they want, right? And then you're going to just have that pendulum problem that exacerbates into perpetuity. So that's why it cannot just be in and of itself, we have to nationalize these social media companies. It has to also be, in addition to, you have to fix what is essentially a broken system in the United States. Like, it's a very tall order. It's because we have all these systems and they're all interconnected. It's not as if you can simply fix one and all the others will be fixed and or be unaffected by that. They have to be in conjunction too. It's a much broader, larger project.
Then you're just instantly with the alt-right. And it becomes, well, how do we get to that situation where politics is not only tribal,
Yeah,
but it's
ratchet.
puritanically tribal, where, and I'm sure the vast majority of the public are going, well, hang about, right? I'm supporting a bit of the lockdown, but I recognize some people are losing their jobs, especially in the entertainment industry and the hospitality industry. And I'm concerned for their lives too. How do we kind of have a bit more nuance? And also, the way in which the pandemic becomes almost like an untouched.
Yeah, I was like, that's always been the case. But anyways, I know there's this narrative now where people like to say that we become more polarized than ever. People now are just simply in factions, almost as if they're in their own political cubes and they won't leave their boxes. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be the same kind of thing. That sucks, though. After reading Brad Evans' Wikipedia, I was actually getting a little excited. I was like, oh, wait, is Brad Evans actually going to be a bit more interesting than the typical Russell Peters guest?
Now, especially for certain elements of the left, I find deeply, deeply problematic, especially, as I say, because I think what their arguments they're presenting are not actually politics at all. They're deeply...
Well, let's be honest. Like, the one good thing, and the thing that I think really pisses off a lot of these people, the people who are trying to talk to you about how, companies like Twitter control our lives, they're coming at this from the wrong angle. Both wrong, like, factually, and wrong just from, if you want to get something done, a strategic standpoint. What they should be talking about when it comes to social media companies and the way they're, operating on us, they should be bringing up completely separate topics. The way he's framing this whole thing, I would think for a second that he's going to bring up, there's a problem if these companies have, complete dictatorial control over what we do, say, and hear. But it's calling you out on stuff that you don't like. Is that ultimately it? Is it getting, is he upset that when he logs on, there's people who disagree with him? Is he upset that he's like, I can't even make a post anymore without having people call me names? They call me like racist or transphobe. I'm just not saying that he said anything in those lines, but why is that always such a concern? And it's and then they just get people shut down, and they're getting shut down for ideas they don't like. And at the end of the day, I'm not really understanding where they're coming from. It's just giant censorship. It's like 1984. I mean, why are we allowing this to happen?
Theological. So.
How would you make the distinction, please, between their argument being theological and political? To help me understand that, please.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the idea of the political has to be always open to the possibility of new kinds of thinking, and it always has to be also. To me, my idea of the political also has to be transgressive. For it to be transgressive, it cannot be rooted in irrefutable morals, because we have no idea what the future is going to hold. I also believe that there's something about the idea of being transgressive.
But that's such a straw man. It's not irrefutable morals. It's not as if people are trying to tell you, hey, by the way, we have new information that's been presented to us through a variety of fields, and we want to start using them in order to respect new groups, new marginalized groups, perhaps like that. It's not setting us in some this is going to be rigid and it's going to be the same forever, and we're always going to say I think it's kind of just asking, can you apply some golden rules, the old golden rules, to groups that perhaps you didn't fully understand before, right? Maybe 20 years ago, it would have been very controversial for people to suggest that there should be equal rights for members of the trans community, because 20 years ago, that wasn't known by a very large swath of the American public. Now they do know about that. Now that they're aware of that, there are people fighting for rights for those people, and there are people calling out those who do not help and or fight for the rights of those people online. And so now that comes back to that old adage with Brad Evans or anyone else who thinks they're being censored online because it's just become, the discourse has become too toxic. If it's just people calling you out, that's one thing. If it's the fact that these corporations have the power to silence individuals as powerful as the president, and yet it's still necessary that people use their platforms, that's another discussion. If you want to use the nuance in this, if you want to have this, very deep investigative issue, you have to understand that these, it cannot just be the thing you don't like, and then you exacerbate that to, this is a problem on the broad left. This is why I'm disgusted, because left and leftism is suddenly become, the arbiters of censorship in 1984.
Which requires a certain outrageousness. I believe, and that's why I think, the history of comedy.
You can be outrageous. You can be transgressive. We're just asking you not to be a bigot, I think. That would be the broader left, especially with your behavior online. Don't be a bigot. Don't be an asshole. And we're kind of advocating for the same thing, I think. Don't be an asshole to other people. Don't just ask questions on the things you don't know, and by asking those questions, actually invite people to do bad things to marginalized communities.
Comedy and art is so important politically because of its transgressive, outrageous potentials. And, and I'm thinking then very much in the spirit of someone like Oscar Wilde, who really recognizes the beautiful poetic spirit of being outrageous, because it's only by taking those risks that you can be transgressive. I see none of that in terms of the so-called theological elements of the left today, where to be outrageous is to be jumped upon, to say something a bit that goes against the grain.
What are you talking about? My whole show is outrageous. Have you seen this? I'm guessing not, Brad Evans. Had you watched one of the surf shows, you'd realize how sane he is. Look at this. Oh yeah, there we go. Now everything makes sense. This one's good. This one's great. But I know what you're thinking. This isn't actually outrageous. This isn't outrageous in the sense that I'm not, really pushing the ether here, pushing the limits of what is possible, going to the very threshold of what we consider to be positive or constructive discourse. That's true. It comes later. For now, penis. Go back, you're in the right room.
Their absolute moral certainties is something which will be immediately the cause for, a major kind of reaction of en masse by them on social media, and how that can be mobilized as much as it can be mobilized by the right. And I think what I understand by theology in that sense is a certain moral dogmatism, which is not open to the recognition that, yes, humans are fallible, but, there's something to be rejoiced in being kind of
Of course, guess what? No, okay, I just want to clear this up, because that's not what the left is saying or fighting for, by the way. The left is not, trying to come at you and be like, hey, by the way, every single one of you, I just want you to know that, no one can have mistakes or make mistakes. You have to be perfectly on pitch, on point at all times. No, it's like you are making this straw man out to be like, people will make mistakes, and if they make mistakes, the left will try to destroy them and get them fired from their job and label them as, a bigot forever and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, you do understand that people are intelligent enough to know the difference between someone saying out loud, hey, I'm just curious, what are your preferred pronouns? That's one question, right? Versus something else like Richard Dawkins making a post now about how, hey, by the way, I'm signing this thing about how biological women are women and that we have to treat biology and sex as something sacred and all this kind of stuff with other fellow academics and fucking J.K. Rowlings of the world. There's a huge difference between those two things. And if he's doing the second one, which is actively going to endanger people's lives, then yes, people are going to call him out for it. People are going to fucking post pictures of him on the Epstein plane and be like, I don't really think you should be in any positions to talk about women's rights, sir, because it is ultimately, there's a huge difference. There's such a massive difference between these two things.
Outrageous, and there's something to be rejoiced in terms of saying, well, actually, we don't have the answers to the future, but actually, let's actually speak to people we might fundamentally disagree with.
No, this came out 2 hours ago.
We might be able to work out this shared crazy thing called the human condition together, rather than being so certain about your place now in history that it doesn't entertain any alternative. And I think that to me is theology. That's not politics.
If you enjoyed that conversation between me and Brad, let me know in the comments.
Not really. It felt kind of reductive. I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah, a wee bit reductive, Mr. Recipe was not a huge fan, but I do appreciate how cozy you look. You are absolutely cozy, my love. Yeah, I want your snuggie. I want your snuggie. I don't want your guests. None of your guests.
This will come down to who can deliver the lower propensity and mid propensity voters.
gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we will build a ladder to heaven to deliver you the daily news. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are your most humble of clownish jesters. To our lords, Trevor R. and Alexander Thaler, you have our undying fealty. To our knights of the round table, Nate, that one guy, Hagbird Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariana McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Ants Are Still Running the World, Coulter Smith, Tom Groh, Val 9000, Jenna Tal, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Riley and Anna, Omni, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojack, Saren 42, Chronic to Hemphog, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We shall meet you in the tavern, and we raise a drink, and we salute you.